So we're back from a break. Everybody found the coffee and snacks you're looking for. We've got Jim, Duuuude, Dixon. I know that he was kind of mentioned yesterday, but all of us really owe him a huge debt of gratitude for the initial work he did. The hardware interfaces he designed became the foundation for what made Asterisk functional and possible. And of course now here we are 10, 15 years later with an entire conference dedicated to it. So that's pretty remarkable. But anyway, Jim, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you. A long time ago, the phone system obviously was very different. We had the phone company. Of course, the phone company was different. You know, it depended upon where you were, depended upon you know, what country you were in, et cetera, et cetera. But everybody, no matter where they were, had something that you could call the phone company. It may have been a cluster of businesses. It may have been one. It may have been a governmental entity. It may have been a lot of things. But there was something called the phone company. And the phone company was never liked by anybody. You know, it doesn't matter who it was again, but it was expensive, it was proprietary, it was closed, and they knew that they had you where they wanted you. And they really took a lot of really unfair advantage of that. Every one of them did. And, you know, it was really time for that to change. And for that reason and many other reasons, I started, you know, I didn't like them. Nobody liked them. I mean, there was certainly no question that it was one of the least liked organizations that anybody ever had to deal with at the time. And, you know, I really wanted to find some way of making that better. So I was, you know, I've been dealing with your computers and telephony for a very, very long time. You know, I was an implementer of very many computer telephony platforms and a number of other things for many years, you know, long before Asterisk, long before, you know, the open source happened with telephony. And it was time that something changed. I realized that because of the fact that I have a good background in telephony and a good background in computers and networking and communications in general, I realized that with the way things were going, I mean, basically, Moore's Law, Dr. Gordon Moore, you know, he was one of the founders of Intel. He was one of the, you know, very, very early people in integrated circuits and microprocessors. He noticed a long time ago in the 70s that as time went on, basically computer power doubled every 18 months. And I'm not sure if he ever really understood why that was, but he recognized that that was the case, and it became what's called Moore's Law. And consistently, as far as I know, that's been the case ever since. So, you know, if you can rely on that, you could see that at some point, computers would be able to, in software, in other words, a standard, like a PC, for example, a standard, you know, commodity type of computer, would be powerful enough eventually to be able to do telephony switching functions, mostly in software with very minimal hardware required, and therefore bringing the complexity and the cost of telephony and implementation of telephony down quite considerably from where it was. Because at the time, it was, you know, big systems, expensive systems, and mostly magic. I mean, most people didn't even know what they did really, or how they worked, or anything. And you know, the people that were making them weren't really about to tell anybody because, you know, that was their cash cow. You know, everything was just so incredibly ridiculously priced for really no good reason. So I was really familiar with what it took to make all this happen, as far as, you know, what a phone switch was, what it would do, etc. And I was, you know, basically trying to project, based on computer complexity and the ability of computers, about the time and, you know, what architecture basically would have enough power, enough ability to be able to accomplish this. And it was getting right around the turn of the century, the change of the millennium, whatever you want to call it, right around 2000. The Pentium 3 had come out. It looked really about like it was time to me. So to me, what I figured was, certainly I'd see people doing this, because I mean, I figured that I wasn't the only person on the planet that probably could see this happen, and could see that this was going to happen, and I really just started looking around. I started searching all over, because I figured I'd see this happen. And I was searching for maybe a year and a half or so as the Pentium 3 first came out, and then faster ones, started with, I guess, with the 450, and then they got faster and faster, et cetera, et cetera. And it was not on anybody's radar. Nobody knew this. So I figured, well, somebody needs to do this. I guess it needs to be me. So that's basically what I did. I knew what it took. I knew what hardware it took. And I did some initial testing and some development just to see if my crazy harebrained idea had any valor, and it certainly did. So I went ahead and I designed a card that was capable of doing two either T1 or E1 interfaces on what at that time was the ISA bus, the ISA bus for like PC compatible computer, and I came out with it, and I released it to the world for free. The design of the card, I included all of the PC board CAD information, so literally anybody could just download this package, go to a PC board house, have these cards made, build them, whatever, completely for free. Basically it was open source hardware. I don't know if anybody had really done that before. I don't really think so, certainly not. Obviously there's experimenters that have been exchanging electrical circuits for years and years and years, long before that. But as far as like a really major hardware, piece of intellectual property like that, I don't know if anybody had ever done that open source with hardware before. So I knew, I've implemented TDM switches before. I've designed them, I've built them, I've made them work. And I know how much of a project it was. I know how complex it is. And to do what I really wanted to do here, that was too big of a piece for me to bite off. So I basically bit off a chunk that was about the right size. And that was, basically the system design, an initial piece of hardware that worked with it, drivers, and a library of user space and some example programs that showed that this thing really does take calls, it really does work, and it even included the ability to do multi-port conferencing, et cetera, and it was all in the driver, and it was all, at the time it was under FreeBSD. That was my operating system of choice. Don't hate me for that. I know everybody here probably likes Linux, but, and I do too now, but back then FreeBSD was my thing. So I released the whole thing, and for about 2 weeks, I kept getting questions like, when are you going to do this for Linux? It just kept happening over and over and over again. And so I figured the handwriting was on the wall. It needed to happen with Linux. I'd never really run Linux before. I'd seen other people do it a few years before that. It hadn't really reached sufficient maturity when I had seen it to really be able to use it reliably. I'd seen people, removing a lot of hair in server rooms because the thing just wouldn't take a load. Now bear in mind, this was, in the 90s, and Linux was pretty young at the time. And by the time I was doing this, it had matured sufficiently to be stable, but I wasn't aware of it because it really wasn't my thing. Anyway, so I went out and I bought a copy of Red Hat Linux off the shelf, back in the good old days when you could buy software in a box, and took a look at an ISA driver. I just wanted to see what a Linux ISA driver looked like. And it looked surprisingly an awful lot like drivers for the other Unixes that I'd implemented. I'd done a number of things on FreeBSD, including obviously the telephony thing recently. I'd written drivers for traditional Unix for quite a long time. So I figured, well, why not? Let's try to port the thing. So that night, I was successfully able to port the driver over to Linux, and the user space stuff, with one exception, with one line, with one include statement I had, compiled just out of the box. That was pretty amazing. I was impressed with that. So I actually got it to work that night. So I released it, and I figured that, you know, Linux people, obviously, but from what I've seen, you know, there's Linux ways of doing things, just like there's FreeBSD ways of doing things, just like any other operating system. There's certain standards, there's certain ways of doing things, formatting things, and I knew none of them for Linux. So I knew that some Linux person would see it and say, this is interesting, but wow, it's just really, you know, in the wrong format, and it's wrong, and let me fix it for you. Well, I woke up the next morning and got exactly that email. And at the bottom of the email it said, by the way, there's something interesting I want to talk to you, please let me call you. That was from Mark Spencer. That's how I met Mark Spencer. And so yes, he fixed my driver and made it all nice and Linuxy and happy. And he talked to me about Asterisk. And I said, wow, this was really meant to happen. This is just the perfect marriage. And that's how Asterisk got started. You know, that's how the whole thing really happened. And you know, we got together, and we you know, took what he had at the time, and we, you know, glued it together, and you know, made some changes in the driver, and you know, it developed over time, and we actually got, you know, a real phone switch working. And that's the phone switch that I have here today at the booth. I'm sure you've probably all seen it. And we've, you know, it's improved a little bit since then, obviously. But that's basically what happened. You know, it's weird how every once in a while, you know, you come across things that were just sort of meant to happen. I always got the impression this was just kind of one of them. You know, we just sort of found each other, and the two parts work so well together. So, you know, I sort of brought not only you know, the system design and the hardware and the ability for Asterisk to actually, you know, talk to, you know, existing interfaces, existing equipment, and actually be part of the PSTN, because it was my intention from the very beginning that all of this was really supposed to replace the PSTN to you know, be, you know, the fundamental implementation of what was to become the PSTN, because it really needed to get out of the hands of the phone company. It really needed to get into the hands of the people, and that was really my intention there. So, you know, I brought you know, my knowledge of what a PSTN switch needed to do. You know, both from a switch that what's called a Class 5 switch that you know, handles subscriber lines, and what's called a Class 4 switch that's basically a tandem. And we implemented that in Asterisk, and that's how it got to be. That's how it got started. That's how it got to be to the point where it was useful, and people that were familiar with telephony were able to see it and go, wow, this thing really is a real switch. It really does have all these features, and they really do work. And you know, the rest. You know, the rest, everybody that's been involved with this has really done an awful lot to really help make Asterisk what it's become. You know, it wasn't just one person, it wasn't just 2 people, it wasn't just 10 people. It's been an awful lot of people. It's been, you know, all of the users, you know, helping, giving feedback, contributing many amazing things to the whole project. And, you know, it really has been a wonderful group effort. And I'm really happy to be part of that. And it's really changed things for the best. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really happy to be part of that. So, are there any questions at this point? Please.
Yeah, Dude. So, yeah, Dude. So I gather that some of the very original Digium cards were based on your own designs. Can you tell us a little bit about how you saw the kind of growth curve that Digium experience and how you might have been involved in that.
Well, yeah, the original card that Digium sold was the original PCI card. You know, basically, the first card that I originally designed was an ISA card, and when it was demonstrated that it was useful and applicable, and we had a switch that worked, etc. I went ahead and designed a PCI card because obviously the ISA bus was dead pretty much at the time. There were only a couple of motherboards, at least new motherboards, that you could buy that even supported it. I did my original design with ISA because it was a really easy way of getting into it and proving that it worked, because the ISA bus was reasonably easy to design for compared with the PCI. But of course, to be really useful to anyone, it really needed to be a PCI bus because, like I said, the ISA bus was pretty much dead. So I designed what became the Tormenta 2 card, and I released that to the world, completely free. And Digium started selling those cards, basically using that exact design that I had made and selling the cards. And obviously there's a number of things that Digium has done since. They started making their own cards, started selling and producing a number of other products and a number of other services and things. It seemed pretty obvious that once the first card was sold, it would show that the business was viable, which of course obviously it was. It would provide some revenue, for some more development, and which of course it did. And things just sort of moved onward and upward from there. The new cards came out, new software came out, things that were better, things that were denser, things that did a lot more, and that just was kind of the natural, logical progression of it.
Long time listener, first time caller. Jim, did you patent any of your cards, or is that counterintuitive in the open source arena?
No, it was, in fact, I actually paid an attorney to produce some wording so that there was no possible way anybody could do anything other than have it as open source and public domain. The whole idea here is that, if you really want to make a revolution, you have to be revolutionary. And, there's no way, when you have something patented, there's a means of controlling it. And this needed to not have control. And that was very important. And I made sure that that was the case.
Who else has a question? No other questions?
As one of the initial members of the Asterisk family, where do you see Asterisk going ahead in the next 5 to 10 years? What?
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly been on a fairly consistent path. Onwards and upwards. Things are like I said, things are getting more efficient. Things are improving. People are coming up with constantly with new and improved things that it can do. It's what it really is it's a kind of a way for people to, it's kind of a platform for people to be able to sort of envision things, make them happy, or make them happen, and give people ability to really sort of implement their vision. That's what, we had a vision to create this thing, and so many people have had so many visions of what they want. You've been good at supporting people and their needs, and that's going to continue. So, in any sort of a thing like this, there's sort of a natural process where the people that are, implementing and designing the thing, react to the needs and the interests of the users, and that just makes the whole thing grow and become a lot richer, and that's what it's going to continue to do.
Dude, I have another question. So, I understand what you're saying about being revolutionary and the thing that you created not having any control over it. How do you see that up against the situation that it was those cards that generated a lot of revenue that allowed Digium to invest in furthering Asterisk? And of course, because it's so free, there's people in various regions producing lots of other cards that are not Digium cards, and when those are purchased, they're not contributing to the ongoing work of Asterisk.
Well, it is though, because, you know, Asterisk is still being used by those people. And, you know, I believe Digium's product is amazing. Do you? I think you do too.
I certainly do.
Of course you do. And, you know, maybe I'm dumb, maybe I'm stupid, maybe I'm insane, but I believe that someone's technology and someone's product should speak for itself. It shouldn't have to be advertised, it shouldn't have to be, in other words, people should come to Digium because the product is amazing, and I think they do.
Thank you.
What was the birth date of that first Tormentor card, do you remember?
Are you talking about the actual production
Yeah.
Tormenta Isa
Can you
card?
repeat the question, please, Jim?
Oh, he was asking about the birth date of the original card. The original production Tormenta card was in 2001. The design was being done in the very late part of 2000. But I believe the Rev A production card, I think, was like January or February of 2001. And then the PCI card was pretty much 2002, early part of 2002.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Has the revolution met your aspirations, and did it more or less go the way you thought it would go?
Yeah, in fact, I think it sort of exceeded them, to be honest with you. You know, I was, there were two things that I really wanted to accomplish with this. One was computer telephony was proprietary, broken, and overpriced. That stopped. You know, all of those things stopped with it. There was other phone equipment manufacturers that, again, were, you know, it was large, it was overpriced, it was attitudinal. That all went away. I'm glad to see that. I was sort of hoping that we'd, you know, sort of help convince, you know, the phone company not to be so evil anymore. I think we pretty much killed them.
Oops.
Oops. I hate when that happens.
One more question.
Sure.
So there's certain things that you predicted and that you said you expected to happen and they did. What happened that you didn't expect or that you didn't predict?
Wow. Wow. There were some really big hardware manufacturers that we just took out that I wasn't expecting to happen. I won't mention them, but you all know who they are. And I really didn't expect that to happen, but it did.
Any other questions?
How are we doing on time? I was.
Got about 10. Yeah, you're good. Go.
Okay.
Totally another topic, but kind
Okay.
of, sort of, but what's your opinion on net neutrality?
I'm sorry?
Net neutrality?
Well, are you talking about whether it's right or wrong, or whether it's happening or not, or what part of that?
Big topic. Big topic, just because I can see that being one of the biggest issues now going forward that could have issues affecting innovation and the ability for people just to do what they want to do is running into net neutrality, and if you don't pay, you're not going to be able to put your product out there.
Yeah, I understand that, and every time I hear people, you know, moaning about that whole thing, about you know, about the different companies trying to get out of the whole neutral and fair game, it sort of concerns me. But my hopes is that, you know, if that whole thing becomes evil, we'll just, you know, you could have many networks, can't you? You know, there doesn't, it's kind of like, and I think that's one of the things that's stopping it, which is, you know, if there needs to be an evil net, fine, we can make an unevil net. No problem.
I think you have envisioned a hardware revolution, and just now David was talking about, you know, others manufacturing the cards and not contributing to the Asterix stream. I mean, how was the vision of your hardware revolution? Is it the way David has pictured, or everybody manufacturing?
Well, I was interested in getting the equipment and the technology into the hands of everyone. And that's what's happened. And that's very important. Again, maybe I'm just stupid or naive or whatever. I'm really not a business dude. But, you know, I've always, you know, and maybe I'm just a stupid idealist. But I'm a firm believer that a product should speak for itself. And as far as I can tell, as far as I can see, you know, it's done very well. Yeah.
So with such a fierce track record of spotting something that needed to change and being involved in the change, do you ever look around Duuuude and see other things that are ripe for change?
Plenty.
Care to name a couple?
I'm sorry?
Do you care to name a couple?
No.
All right, I'll tell you what, let's do it historically. So, between when you did the Zapata revolution and now, have you seen anything along the way that you thought, that needs to change, and then somebody's changed it, and you kind of smiled to yourself that you concurred?
I would imagine so. I mean, if you're going to ask me to name them at this moment, you know, I'd probably have to think about it, probably longer than the scope of this discussion. But yeah, I'm sure there has been quite a few, actually.
Okay, thank you.
So in the scope of the revolution, did you ever find yourself getting pushback from some of the big manufacturers, you know, some of the big PBX providers, you know, seeing where this is going, see where it's going, and trying to buy you out, or trying to, you know, re-steer the direction of the way this is going?
Well, I really tried my best to try to make it painfully obvious that that wasn't an option, so no one would even bother trying, because it's not.
Once you got it up and running, do you remember the first phone call you made? Was that maybe to Ma Bell to kind of laugh in their face?
Are you talking about the first actual phone call as a user? I mean, you know, there's a lot. It's like, you know, I do a lot of two-way radio stuff. You know, obviously with Asterisk, I do a lot of other things, and you know, there's a lot of, you know, traffic. There's a lot of